You're standing at the edge of your bed at 3:15 in the morning, and you can't sleep. Not because of anxiety, not because of stress, but because something inside you finally cracked open. The notification came yesterday afternoon. Another rejection. Another closed door. Another person telling you they've decided to go in a different direction. You've been keeping count. 17 this month alone. Here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. It's not dramatic. There's no music playing, no audience watching, no moment of clarity wrapped in golden light. It's just you in the dark finally understanding that the cavalry isn't coming. Your parents can't fix this. Your friends can't network you into success. The government isn't going to write you a check. The universe isn't conspiring in your favor. And that realization, that brutal ice-cold understanding, is the most valuable thing that will ever happen to you. Derek Sullivan learned this at 42 years old. Middle management at a logistics company for 16 years. Solid performer, well-liked, showed up on time, did what was asked. Then the restructuring came, not because he failed, not because he wasn't good enough, but because the company found someone overseas who could do 70% of his job for 30% of his salary. The market doesn't care about your tenure. It doesn't care about your mortgage or your kid's college fund or how loyal you've been. Derek spent the first month writing perfect cover letters, customized each one, highlighted his achievements, referenced mutual connections. He spent the second month getting bitter. The system was rigged. The economy was broken. Loyalty meant nothing anymore. He spent the third month feeling sorry for himself, watching other people succeed on social media while he submitted applications into the void. By month 4, he'd stopped shaving regularly. By month 5, he was having the same conversation with his wife every night about how unfair everything was. Month 6, something shifted. Not because of inspiration, not because someone gave him a pep talk, but because his bank account hit a number that made his hands shake. He was sitting in his car outside a coffee shop, unable to afford to go inside when he saw his old colleague walk past. Promoted twice since Derek left. Derek's first instinct was resentment. Then he noticed something else. The guy looked tired, really tired. The kind of tired that comes from waking up at 5 every morning and working until 8 at night. That's when it hit Derek. While he'd been perfecting his victim story, other people were perfecting their skills. While he'd been waiting for someone to recognize his worth, other people were building worth that couldn't be ignored. While he'd been explaining why things were unfair, other people were adapting to the unfairness and winning anyway. The marketplace has no conscience. It doesn't care if you're a good person. It doesn't care if you were raised in poverty or privilege. It doesn't care if you're tired, if you're scared, if you've been hurt before. It has one question. What value are you creating? And if your answer isn't good enough, it moves on without a second thought. This isn't cruelty. This is clarity. Think about the last time you bought something. Did you care about the salesperson's struggles? Did you pay extra because the company had a sad story? No. You ask yourself one question. Does this solve my problem? That's exactly how the world evaluates you. Every employer, every client, every opportunity, they're all asking the same thing. Can you deliver results? Your feelings about whether that's fair are completely irrelevant. Derek spent the next 90 days doing something he'd never done in his entire career. He stopped preparing to look for work and started preparing to be undeniable. He didn't update his resume again. He didn't send out another generic application. Instead, he identified the 3 skills that would make him valuable in the new economy, and he learned them with the intensity of someone who understood he was out of time. 4 hours every morning before his family woke up, studying supply chain automation. 3 hours every evening after they went to bed, building proficiency in data analytics software. Weekends, he created sample projects, actual deliverables he could show rather than just claim. He stopped going to networking events where everyone complained about the job market and started contributing to online forums where people solved real problems. Nobody encouraged him. His wife was supportive but worried. His friends thought he was wasting his time, that he should just find anything and take it. His father told him to be realistic, to lower his expectations, to accept that maybe his best years were behind him. And that's where most people stop. Not because they can't do the work, but because they can't do the work without applause. They need someone to notice, someone to validate, someone to tell them they're on the right track. They're waiting for permission to become exceptional. Derek kept going because he finally understood something fundamental. Nobody cares. Not in a nihilistic, depressing way. In a liberating, empowering way. Nobody is sitting around thinking about your potential. Nobody is losing sleep over whether you're going to figure it out. They're busy with their own lives, their own problems, their own climb, which means you're free. Free from needing their approval. Free from waiting for their recognition. Free to work as hard as you want to become, as skilled as you were willing to become, to build something so undeniable that the world has to respond. Month 9. Derek didn't apply for a job. He didn't send a resume. He reached out to 5 companies with a specific offer. Let me solve this problem you're facing, and if I succeed, we'll talk about what comes next. 3 ignored him. 1 said no. 1 said yes. He delivered results in 30 days that their current team hadn't achieved in 6 months. Not because he was smarter, not because he was more talented, but because while they were working normal hours and taking normal breaks and maintaining normal boundaries, he was working like someone who understood that normal gets you normal results. They offered him a position. Then their competitor heard about what he'd done and offered him more. Within a year, he wasn't looking for work anymore. Work was looking for him. The transformation wasn't in his circumstances. It was in his understanding of how the world actually operates. Success isn't fair. It isn't guaranteed. It isn't owed to you because you showed up or because you tried or because you deserve it. Success goes to the people who create value so consistently, so undeniably that ignoring them becomes impossible. Stop waiting for the world to care about your journey. It won't. Start working so hard that your results make caring irrelevant. There's a difference between motion and progress that most people never figure out. They confuse being busy with being productive. They mistake activity for achievement. They work 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week and wonder why nothing changes. Why the gap between where they are and where they want to be keeps widening instead of closing. Alberta Baptiste understood this distinction at 28 years old, but she learned it the hardest way possible. Her parents came to this country with 2 suitcases and a dream that their children would have opportunities they never had. Her father drove a taxi 16 hours a day. Her mother cleaned office buildings at night and took care of other people's children during the day. They worked themselves into exhaustion, into illness, into old age before their time. Alberta watched this growing up and made herself a promise she would honor their sacrifice by succeeding. She went to college on loans and scholarships. She graduated with decent grades. She got an entry-level position at a marketing firm. She showed up on time, stayed late when asked, completed every assignment given to her. 5 years passed. She was still in the same position, watching people younger than her get promoted, watching opportunities go to others. While she kept her head down and worked hard, she told herself it was about timing, about office politics, about things outside her control. But late at night, when she was honest with herself, she knew something else was happening. She was working hard at the wrong things. Every morning, she'd arrive early, make coffee, organize her desk, check emails, respond to messages, attend meetings, complete tasks assigned to her. She was busy from the moment she arrived until the moment she left. But none of it moved her forward. None of it made her more valuable. None of it separated her from the dozen other people doing the exact same tasks with the exact same competence. The truth she couldn't escape. Her parents' work ethic had given her the foundation. But she'd mistaken the foundation for the entire building. They worked hard because they had no other choice, no other leverage, no other path. She had choices they never had, leverage they never possessed, paths they couldn't even imagine. And she was squandering all of it by treating effort as the goal instead of as the tool. One evening, she stayed after everyone left and looked at the work of the person who'd just been promoted, someone 3 years younger with half her experience. She expected to find genius. Instead, she found focus. While Alberta had been responding to every request, attending every meeting, making herself available to everyone, this person had identified the 3 things that actually mattered to the company's bottom line and had become exceptional at those 3 things. Everything else delegated, minimized, or eliminated. Alberta went home that night and did something she'd never done before. She audited her own time like she was a hostile investor looking for waste. She tracked every single activity for 2 weeks. The results made her sick. 47 hours of work time, 19 hours spent in meetings that produced nothing, 12 hours on email and messages that could have been handled in 2, 8 hours on tasks that literally anyone could do. That left 8 hours of actual high-value work. 8 hours out of 47 where she was building skills, solving real problems, but creating something that mattered. She'd been working hard her entire career at being mediocre. The next Monday, everything changed. Not because she worked more hours. She actually worked fewer. But she rebuilt every single day around one principle. If this activity doesn't make me more valuable, it doesn't happen. 4:30 in the morning became her new starting line. Not at the office, but at her kitchen table, with one goal. Learn the skills that would make her indispensable. She identified what the company actually needed, not what they said they needed in meetings, but what kept the executives up at night. Revenue growth, customer retention, market differentiation. She taught herself advanced data analytics, not because someone asked her to, not because it was in her job description, but because she recognized that decisions in her company were being made on gut feeling and past experience, while their competitors were making them on predictive models and real-time data. 6 weeks of 4:30 mornings. No exceptions. Sick? Study anyway. Tired? Study anyway. Friends having a party? Study anyway. She stopped negotiating with herself about whether she felt like it. Feelings became irrelevant. The work got done because the work getting done was the only thing that mattered. Then she did something most people are terrified to do. She stopped saying yes to everything. When someone asked her to attend a meeting that wasn't critical, she declined. When someone tried to pull her into a project that would consume her time without advancing her value, she set boundaries. When her manager asked her to take on administrative work, she respectfully explained that her time would be better spent on strategic initiatives. Some people didn't like it. Some people thought she'd become difficult, demanding, too ambitious. She lost the reputation of being the nice, helpful person who was always available. She gained something far more important. She became the person who delivered results nobody else could deliver. 3 months after she started her new routine, she walked into her manager's office with an unsolicited analysis showing exactly where the company was losing customers and a detailed plan for how to fix it. Not theories, not suggestions, actual data, actual solutions, actual projected outcomes. Her manager looked at the work for a long time, then asked a simple question. How long did this take you? 6 weeks. You did this in addition to your regular work. I did this instead of pretending my regular work mattered. That conversation could have gotten her fired. Instead, it got her promoted. Not immediately. They made her prove she could deliver on the plan first. She spent the next 4 months implementing every detail she'd proposed. Early mornings, late nights, weekends when necessary. But here's what was different. She wasn't working hard to look busy. She was working hard to produce something undeniable. The results came in ahead of schedule and exceeded projections. Customer retention improved by 18%. Revenue from existing accounts increased by 23%. Suddenly, executives who'd never known her name were asking for her input. Within a year, she'd been promoted twice. Within 2 years, she was running a department. But the transformation wasn't about titles or salary increases. It was about understanding that hard work, without strategic focus, is just slow motion failure. Most people never make this distinction. They pride themselves on being busy, on working long hours, on being exhausted at the end of every day. They wear their fatigue like a badge of honor. Meanwhile, someone else is working just as hard, but working on the things that actually compound, that actually accumulate value, that actually create leverage. You can spend 10 years perfecting the ability to do tasks that don't matter, or you can spend 10 months becoming exceptional at the one thing that does. The effort might be the same. The outcome will be completely different. Alberta's parents worked themselves to exhaustion and barely survived. She works herself to exhaustion and thrives. The difference isn't effort, it's direction. It's the brutal honesty to admit when you lack. Working hard at the wrong things and the courage to strip everything else away. The world doesn't reward you for trying. It doesn't give you points for effort. It doesn't care how tired you are, or how much you sacrificed, or how many hours you put in. It asks one question. Did you produce something valuable? And if you didn't, all those hours were just practice at being tired. There comes a moment in every transformation when you realize the people around you aren't coming with you. Not because they're bad people. Not because they don't care about you. But because growth requires you to become someone they don't recognize anymore. And most relationships in your life were built for the person you used to be, not the person you're becoming. Colin Hartwell figured this out on a Tuesday night at a sports bar, where he'd met his friends every week for 7 years. He was 35 years old, sitting in the same booth they always sat in, listening to the same conversations they always had, complaints about bosses, jokes about wives and girlfriends, predictions about games that didn't matter, plans for the weekend that would look identical to last weekend and the weekend before that. Something had shifted in him over the previous 6 months. He'd decided, really decided, not just wished or hoped that he was going to become a civil engineer. The problem was, he'd spent the last 12 years working construction. Good money, honest work, but he'd hit the ceiling of where that path could take him. He looked at the crew leaders, the site managers, the people 20 years ahead of him, and he saw exactly where he'd end up if nothing changed. So, he'd enrolled in night classes, started with community college to fill the gaps in his education, with plans to transfer to a 4-year program. It meant studying after 10-hour days on job sites. It meant his body aching while he tried to focus on calculus. It meant spending money on textbooks instead of the things his friends spent money on. That Tuesday night, he mentioned he couldn't make their usual weekend plans because he had a major exam. The response wasn't supportive curiosity. It was mockery disguised as humor. College boy thinks he's too good for us now. What? You going to wear a suit and forget where you came from? Engineers don't know what real work is anyway. He laughed it off, but something hardened inside him. These were people he'd known since high school. People he'd trusted, celebrated with, mourned with, and they were threatened by his decision to want more. The following week, his girlfriend of 3 years told him she missed the old him, the fun version, who'd go out on weeknights, who'd take spontaneous trips, who wasn't always exhausted from studying. She didn't say it directly, but the message was clear. Choose between this relationship and this dream. He chose the dream, not because he didn't love her, but because he finally understood that anyone who needs you to stay small so they can stay comfortable doesn't actually want what's best for you. They want what's easy for them. The next few months were the loneliest of his life. He'd leave the job site and head straight to the library because his apartment felt too quiet, too empty, too full of reminders of the life he'd walked away from. His phone stopped ringing as often. The group chat he'd been part of for years went silent whenever he contributed. Weekend invitations dried up. He ate lunch alone, sitting in his truck with textbooks spread across the passenger seat. While his former crew joked and complained together, he worked through problem sets. While they went out after work, he went to study groups with people 10 years younger who looked at him like he didn't belong there either. The students his age thought he was too old, too rough around the edges, too different from them. His coworkers thought he was delusional, wasting his time, trying to be something he wasn't. He existed in this strange middle space where nobody understood what he was doing or why it mattered. There were nights he almost quit, not because the work was too hard, but because the isolation was crushing. Humans aren't built for this kind of solitude. We're wired for belonging, for acceptance, for community. Every part of his biology was screaming at him to go back, to apologize, to fit in again. But he kept showing up to class, to the library, to the drawing board, where he practiced technical skills until his hands cramped. He kept showing up because he discovered something most people never learn. Comfort is expensive, and the price is your potential. 18 months into his journey, something unexpected happened. He started meeting different people. Not through networking events or forced social situations, but naturally through the work itself. A study partner who was also returning to school after years in the workforce. a professor who saw something in his practical experience that the younger students lacked, a visiting lecturer who offered him an internship that would have been impossible from his old life. These weren't better people than his old friends. They were just people moving in the same direction he was moving. And suddenly, instead of defending his choices, he was surrounded by others making similar sacrifices. He learned something crucial during those isolated months. You don't find your people by looking for them. You find them by becoming the person who attracts them. When you're committed to mediocrity, you'll be surrounded by people celebrating mediocrity. When you're committed to growth, you'll eventually find others who value the same thing. By year 3, the isolation had transformed into something else entirely. He wasn't lonely anymore because he'd built an entirely new life with entirely new relationships based on entirely new values. His old friends were still having the same conversations in the same bar. He was designing structural systems for buildings that would stand for generations. The girlfriend who wanted the fun version of him had moved on to someone else. Someone who'd give her what she wanted without challenging her to grow. He'd met someone different now. Someone who understood that partnership means supporting each other's evolution, not anchoring each other to comfort. His family finally stopped asking when he was going to give up and be realistic. They stopped because the evidence became undeniable. The internship turned into a junior position. The junior position turned into licensed work. The licensed work turned into projects he couldn't have imagined when he started. But here's what nobody tells you about this process. Even after you succeed, even after you prove everyone wrong, some of those relationships never recover. Some people you loved will never forgive you for outgrowing them. They'll remember you as the person who thought he was better than everyone else, who abandoned his roots, who changed. And you have to make peace with that, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending decades wondering what you could have become if you'd 5. We'd been willing to endure the isolation. The alternative is growing old, surrounded by people who kept you comfortable while your potential died of neglect. Colin sees his old friends occasionally. They're polite now, distant. Sometimes he catches them looking at him like he's a stranger, and in a way, he is. The person they knew doesn't exist anymore. That person was killed by discipline and reborn as someone they never imagined he could become. Success demands sacrifice, but the sacrifice isn't what most people think. It's not money or time or comfort. It's belonging. It's the warm feeling of fitting in with people who aren't going anywhere. You cannot transform and stay the same. You cannot grow and remain comfortable. You cannot become exceptional while surrounded by people who are committed to being ordinary. The work is hard. The isolation is harder. But on the other side is a life you can't even imagine from where you're standing now. A life that was always available, waiting for you to be willing to walk toward it alone. Motivation dies every single time. That rush you feel after watching something inspiring, after reading something powerful, after hearing a story that makes you want to change your entire life, it evaporates, usually within 72 hours, sometimes within 72 minutes. Nora Valdez learned this lesson twice, and the second time nearly destroyed her before it saved her. Her first business failed after 2 years of 16-hour days, a boutique consulting firm helping small businesses with their marketing strategy. She'd poured everything into it. Her savings, her energy, her relationships. The failure wasn't dramatic. No spectacular collapse, no devastating loss. Just a slow bleed of clients, mounting debt, and the quiet realization that working hard wasn't enough. When the foundation was built on hope instead of systems, she shut it down on a Friday afternoon, sent emails to her remaining clients, and spent the weekend convincing herself she'd given it her best shot. By Monday, she had a job offer from a former client. Decent salary, benefits, the security she'd been missing. She took it and told herself she'd tried entrepreneurship, and it wasn't for her. 18 months later, she was miserable. Not because the job was terrible, but because she knew she'd quit on herself. She'd stopped because it got hard, because the motivation ran out, because she didn't know how to sustain effort when everything inside her wanted to stop. So, she tried again. Different business model, different approach. Same Nora. For the first 3 months, she was unstoppable, working nights and weekends while keeping her day job. Every spare moment dedicated to building something better than before. She felt alive again, purposeful, driven. Then month 4 arrived and brought with it the exact same enemy that had beaten her before. The fading of intensity, the excitement dulled. The vision that had seemed so clear became fuzzy. The tasks that had felt meaningful started feeling like obligations. She was still working, still putting in hours, but the fire had gone out. This time, she recognized what was happening. The pattern was repeating. In a few weeks, she'd start making excuses. In a few months, she'd convince herself it wasn't the right time. In a year, she'd be back where she started, wondering why she couldn't sustain what she'd started. That's when she stopped trying to get motivated and started building something entirely different. She stopped chasing the feeling and started constructing the structure. Because feelings are weather. They change constantly, unpredictably, without your permission. Structure is architecture. It stands regardless of how you feel about it. She created rules, but not the kind most people make. Not aspirational guidelines she could negotiate with when she felt tired. Absolute laws that didn't bend. She would work on her business from 5 to 7 every morning before her day job. Not when she felt like it. Not when inspiration struck. Every single morning. No exceptions, no negotiations. The first weeks were misery. Her body rejected the schedule. Her mind created elaborate justifications for why she should skip just this once. She felt nothing close to motivation, but she'd made the rule non-negotiable, so her feelings became irrelevant. Something shifted around week 6. Not that it got easier, it didn't, but it stopped being a decision. She'd removed the daily debate about whether she'd do the work. The work simply happened because that's what 5 o'clock meant. Then she applied the same principle to everything else. Client outreach happened Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 7 to 9. Financial review happened Sunday mornings. Content creation happened Saturday afternoons. She built her entire business around scheduled blocks that didn't care about her mood, her energy, or her enthusiasm. People thought she was obsessed. They'd ask how she stayed so motivated, so driven, so consistent. They were asking the wrong question. She wasn't motivated. Most days, she actively didn't want to do the work, but motivation had become obsolete because the system ran independent of it. Her second business grew differently than her first. Slower in some ways, but sustainable. No dramatic peaks of productivity followed by valleys of inaction. Just steady, relentless, mechanical progress. Month after month, the compound effect of showing up, whether she felt like it or not. Within 2 years, she'd replaced her salary. Within 3, she'd doubled it. Within 4, her day job was the side project she was phasing out. But the real transformation wasn't financial. It was identity. She'd stopped being someone who worked hard when conditions were right and became someone for whom hard work was the default setting. Not because she was special or different or more disciplined by nature, but because she deliberately rebuilt her entire operating system around one principle. Who you are is what you do repeatedly, and what you do repeatedly is determined by your systems, not your feelings. She discovered something powerful in that transformation. When excellence stops being an occasional burst of effort and becomes your baseline expectation, you develop an advantage that's nearly impossible for others to overcome. They're still negotiating with themselves every morning about whether today is the day they've worked hard. You've already finished 2 hours of focused work before they've decided to start. Derek learned that nobody cares about your circumstances. Alberta learned that hard work without focus is wasted effort. Colin learned that growth requires isolation. Nora completed the picture. Temporary intensity is worthless. Permanent standards are everything. You can get motivated right now. You can feel that surge of determination, that conviction that this time will be different. You can make promises to yourself about how hard you're going to work, how committed you're going to be, how nothing will stop you. And in 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months, that motivation will abandon you exactly when you need it most. Right when the work gets tedious, right when results are slow, right when staying comfortable seems so much easier than continuing forward. That's not a flaw in your character. That's human nature. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are temporary by design. The only people who win are the ones who build structures that function independent of emotion. They create schedules that don't negotiate. They establish standards that don't flex. They develop identities where hard work isn't something they do when they feel like it. It's who they are whether they feel like it or not. This isn't inspiration. This is engineering. You're not trying to feel differently. You're trying to build differently. Construct your days so tightly that there's no room for negotiation. Make your standards so clear that there's no space for interpretation. Design your life so the path of least resistance leads directly toward your goals instead of away from them. Nobody cares about your potential. Nobody is tracking whether you're working hard or hardly working. Nobody is waiting to reward you for trying your best. The world measures output, results, value created. Everything else is invisible. So stop waiting for the day you feel ready. Stop searching for the perfect moment of clarity. Stop expecting motivation to carry you across the finish line. Build the machine. Feed it daily. Let it run regardless of weather, mood, or circumstance. That's not the inspirational answer. It's the only answer that actually works. The life you want exists, but only the person you become through relentless, systematic, non-negotiable work will ever touch